Okay, so we know that part works. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on here. I think we can put the top back on then at that stage. Our cotton, or our thread that we had round there, I'll have to put that there. Okay, so let's put a bit of synthetic grease on here. I'm going to put some on that gear for good measure too. Some on that arm, where it runs underneath that plate. I think we're in good shape with that. Let's have a look at the top cover. Give that a wipe and give that a wipe. Check that my windows still appear to be clean. Fit that top cover down in position. Check that the shutter cocks. That's all looking good. I'm going to look for some screws to hold that top cover down now. I'm sure I've got them right here in front of me. Okay, that all appears to be working. One here, and we'll put the rewind knob on. Rewind knob actually doesn't need to be taken off when you're lifting this camera top on this particular camera, because this whole shaft comes out of a large hole in the top of that casting and will lift off as one piece. See if we can get this on here. Looks good, and the way that that's arranged, when that's down in the normal running position, this freewheels, so there's no tension on the film cassette from the rewind, and the knob doesn't rotate as the film passes through the camera. So if you're viewing the rewind knob as a method of determining that you have wound the film on correctly to make sure it's rotating, it's going to fool you because it's not going to do it. If you pulled it into the up position, then it would be locked. This is your rewinding position, of course. If you pull it in the up position, the knob is locked to this and it will rotate. But when it's pressed down, it won't. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Let's get the advanced knob in place here, I think. This was a lever advanced camera at one stage, but it is not a lever advance anymore, and that's because somebody's lost those pieces, which of course is exceptionally common with any Paxette, because they're really awkward to put back together. Right, so that cocks correctly, that's good. Now I want to get the gear and so forth on the bottom here, which will hold this knob on so it can't fall off. I'll take this plate off again. I put this plate on temporarily to hold my rewind stuff and the sprocket shaft stuff on there, because otherwise everything would fall out and cause me grief. Just checking what parts I've got here and what I have not. We've got a gear. Some of these cameras may have a washer under that gear and others may not. I'm just giving that a little wipe with synthetic grease and get that on the shaft. is push that down without disturbing the knob itself. And trying to get it engaged with the film advance there. That looks right. Okay. Let's give this a little wipe and stick that on. There's a washer that went in there. That's a steel washer, and that's so that the spring doesn't abrade away that aluminium piece there. I'll put a little bit of grease on that spring. This little collar, the square hole in the middle, that goes on. And then we have a fixing screw. And of course, getting that collar to engage with the squared shaft is the next challenge, because inevitably it won't want to do it. I've got that screw started. That's a start. Push that collar around until it drops into place. It's not dropping into place, so it means that the spring's not tensioned because it's not sitting correctly. The knob's not in any danger of coming off now, of course, because all of this is holding it in place. Let's see if we can push that little drive dog around. It's fair comment that nothing on the Paxettes was engineered for the convenience of the repairer, or even the assembler in the factory for that matter. Nothing here is convenient. Everything's awkward. That's it. It just fell into place. I can do that screw up. So now the film advance, no danger of coming off. And I want to feel to make sure there's some controlled slippage here, and that is too tight. There needs to be some slip here. If that's done up really tight and it binds, basically it means that you'll have the film advance shaft here and the sprocket trying to advance the film at different rates, which would be somewhat disastrous. So I'm just adjusting that. It's got a feel that I like. It's got to have a controlled slippage. There will always be resistance there when you're rewinding the film because of that clutch. Oh, I can see I've got a washer here in front of me. I'm going to have to go back and put this where it should be. Okay, let's get these pieces of this film advance back together. That obviously does not go there. This gear can go on. That's probably a snug fit on that shaft. Just adjust this so that it will engage with the gear in there. Just in the way it's not doing at the moment. Oh, that's better. It's there now. It's seated. Okay. So here's our componentry. Let's get these out. Okay, so first the drive dog can go on, then a washer that fits over the squared shaft, then the spring. These pieces I've lubricated all of them with some synthetic grease. Then this little collar, it's got a square hole in the middle, and good luck getting that lined up with the shaft, because I can guarantee you it won't want to line up with a square shaft. Then this washer, no, it can't be that washer. Then this screw, ignore that washer. I haven't decided what that's for, but it's not here. Now I've got to get this screw attached, this screw tightened up, but I've got to get that collar with the square hole in it on the shaft. And at the moment it's not dropping over the shaft, now it is. I'm just checking this for tension. There should be some controlled slippage there, because otherwise the take-up spool and the sprocket will be trying to move the film at different amounts, which is the case because as the film builds up on the spool, as the diameter grows, it's pulling more film through for the same number of revolutions. And of course that would be a recipe for failure. Okay, let's get this plate back on there now. I'll give that a wipe, just for good measure. Now my sprocket shaft bush here is obviously popped out of place. Now that's better. And I'll get that screw in there. That's better. As the film advance back together. Yeah, that wash is haunting me. I've got to think where that came from. I hope I haven't left it out of the frame counter. I might have to go back and have a look. The offending missing washer. The washer I hadn't got a home for. I looked at my video as I took the frame counter apart. There was no sign of any washer there, which could only mean that it was, if it was present, and it certainly appeared later, that it must have been underneath one of these pieces I'd lifted out. And the most logical place for it was between this plate, the moving plate, and the plate underneath it that acts as the little ratchet stop, so that stops the wheel from backing up. That's the most logical place for it, because it separates these two flat plates and means that they're not likely to stick together with oil or grease or anything of that nature. So I'm happy to have found a home for that washer. In finding that, I came to that determination after a bit of a hassle, because I took two other cameras apart from my pile of parts cameras, thinking I would see exactly the same arrangement and then I would know where the washer went. Neither of them had that washer. One of them had a different washer in a different place, and the other one was a completely different design. So that was the end of that. But this appears to work quite well. There's no problem with that counter. and I'm ready to put this camera back together for the final time, I think. So the thing I've got to achieve is to reinstate the thread that we had around here, that linen thread that we had running around there. That's gone now, and I've got to reinstate it. And that linen thread basically was glued on the inside edge of this top cover. And here's the front here. I think it was glued here, doubled back on itself around the back edge, and glued round here, doubled back on itself. So I've just got to do the same thing. So first of all, I'll just clean this top cover with a bit of naphtha, get any oil and grease out of those places. And then I'll take some adhesive and I'll run it around those edges, and then I'll press that yarn into place and leave it to set for a few minutes before I reassemble the camera. Okay. Okay, so I've just got to keep my front and my back clear in my mind here, because this is where it's going to loop around and come right round the back and then back to there, I think. I'll just put some adhesive out here. It's probably not necessary to have this continuous. Once it's in place, the top of the body will hold that firmly in position anyway. Where's the back? Down this edge here. Let's press the yarn into position. Just like that. Cut it off there. There. Fold that loose end back. And do the same over here. I'll put another spot of adhesive here. Get a bit more off that. There you go, I think that'll do us. That'll be our light trap. And I'll give that a couple of minutes and I'll put the top back on the camera, I think. I think that'll do. Let's get this top back on here. One last blow out to make sure I've got no dust on those glasses. It's all looking good. That's it, that feels like that's seated. And on this camera we have 3 screws that hold the top cover to the body. On some of the other Paxettes that look quite similar, there are 4 screws. Remove that cover. Okay, get the film advance back in there. So, from the top, let's get this knob in place. I'll bring that to the cocked position. Should be something around about there actually. That's fine. Just checking that that cocks and that the frame counter moves. That's all looking good. That can go back on. No, it can't. You forgot to tell me to put the gear in there. That's better. Now I've got to get this top collar with the square on it. Yeah, it's in place now. Just checking that that doesn't have too much drag on it. It needs to have some. That feels good. Now the base plate can go on. If we put the spool on there, the base plate can go on. This thing here is going to be pressed down so that it engages over that, what was it on this one? It was a tension pin on this camera, wasn't it? I'm not sure that they all have a tension pin. I think some of them just have a plain pin, possibly even permanently fixed. And there are 3 screws here. The longer of the 3 went in that position. Now the Paxettes varied quite a bit in their arrangements. The cameras look much the same on the outside, but there were changes to how things were done inside. And the base plate here is one of them. This is a very simple base plate. It constrains the take-up spool, but it has nothing at the supply, at the cassette end. There's nothing there. So, in this camera, we look inside the case. Well, that's not the right one. So, this is the cover we're after. Yeah, I get this angled correctly for the light. You can see that there's a little step down in the body, right down here. Just a little plate of metal sticking out. Now that's job is to hold up the film cassette. And how is that done on the other Paxettes? Well, I'll show you. Let's find one here. Here we go. Here's a perfect example. A lot of the Paxettes you'll find, possibly the majority, have this swing out bracket. So you put your cassette in there, swing the bracket across. The bracket supports the cassette, and the backs for those, as a result, have no little metal tab to support the cassette. So be aware of that, because if you're not aware of that, there's nothing surer than that you will end up mix and matching parts when you are trying to make something good out of your parts cameras, and things won't be right. So that's the secret with that. If you've got a camera that has that swing out piece there, the back will be plain. There'll be no projection inside the camera back. And if you've got one that's plain like this, no swing out piece, it's going to be looking for a back that has a small projection, which is basically there to support the film cassette. Okay, so this is pretty much done as this camera goes. If I can put its rewind back on, so we can pull that back up a bit. Let's get that screw in there and pull that up a bit. It's just sitting a bit low at the moment. That's better. Just get that knob seated on the flats. Here I have the film reminder dial. I'll put the screw in there. That all moves correctly. So that Paxette has now had the shutter service, and along the way you got to see me service the film advance. What you haven't seen is the joy of dealing with the film advance levers. I'll show you that. So how do you go about taking apart the film advance on a Paxette if you just wanted to get under the top cover, and if there was nothing wrong with your film advance? You've already alluded, well, I think I've alluded to the fact that putting these back together is a real mission. But you can take them off complete and put them back complete. But I'll show you how you do it. So we'll start by taking the back off the camera. This one, like the camera I've just shown you, has got the simplified faceplate. So inside the case there's a small step to support the cassette. Let's take this off. 3 screws. You will probably find either 3 screws exactly the same length. Those screws are not identical. I'm looking at them now. One screw's got quite a different head on it. The other two are identical. On the other camera we just dealt with, there was a longer screw in that position. I would probably sort through my parts and find a longer screw to put back. Let's take this off. Take out the take-up spool and take out this screw holding this in place. Lift that off, complete. The gear may fall off for us if we're very fortunate, just like that, or you can leave it in place. It'll stay with the camera. In this camera I have got a washer underneath that gear, which was conspicuously absent in the other camera, and no, it was not the washer that I didn't have a home for. The washer I didn't have a home for didn't have a hole big enough to go over that squared shaft. Okay, so here we have nothing holding the film advance lever on. It's just seated in there. You need to be aware that there's a return spring for the lever, and the return spring sits into a little groove in the top of the camera body there. Now I'm going to take a feeler gauge, in this case a 12 thousandths of an inch, which it looks like it's 0.3 millimeters, and I'm going to catch that spring and pull it forward out of its retainer. So now it's sitting out here, the tab on that spring, and I should be able to lift off my film advance as a single piece. Now that's all complete. That's ready to go back on the camera in that state. It can't fly to pieces. And here's our return spring. And basically when I went to put this back on the camera, I will have to have that return spring held back with either a piece of I tend to use a braided line to hold it back, but you could hold it back with a feeler gauge as you seat this back on the body. So let's get on to the joy of reassembling one of these, because as you've probably heard, the film advance lever on a Paxette is not much better than a nightmare. We'll remove the screw from the top. In this case there's a little brass washer under the top. I can guarantee that they won't always be a little brass washer, because these things vary so much. Let's lift off this. I'll slide this pair of tweezers under there, see if I can get this all off in one piece. Okay, so there's our wind knob. Basically its function is exactly the same as a wind knob would be on the earlier Paxettes. And here we have the mechanism for doing our this is the return spring here for our rewind, for our advance rather. Now in here we have a washer, we have a little pawl, a little ratchet gear, there's the spring that operates, that pushes that pawl and keeps it in contact with that ratchet gear. Then we have the return spring. Then we have a brass washer here and here. So that's the sum total of the parts in that advance lever, and they can be fun to put back together. I'll show you how I did it so that it was less of a fight. It's never going to be easy.